Cold and unforgiving thunder cracked open the sky, and lightning illuminated the endless stretch of grassland. In brief blinding flashes, a broken carriage lay tilted near a shallow ditch. One wheel shattered beyond repair.
Just rest now.
Nearby, a young woman lay motionless in the mud, her once elegant dress torn and soaked with rain. Her name was Isabella DeLuca. Just hours earlier, she had been traveling with her family, returning from a business gathering in a nearby town. The DeLucas were known for their wealth and influence, respected by many and feared by some. But respect built on power is fragile. When a group of bandits ambushed the carriage, chaos erupted, horses panicked, gunshots echoed, and fear took control. In the confusion, Isabella had fallen while trying to escape. She struck her head against a rock and lost consciousness. When her family realized she was missing, they searched briefly, but the storm was worsening and the bandits might return. Fear outweighed loyalty, believing she was either dead or beyond saving. They made a choice that would change everything. They left her behind now. The rain washed over her pale face as if trying to wake her. Her breathing was shallow, barely visible in the cold night air. The plains were no place for the weak. Wolves roamed at night. The temperature dropped quickly after sunset. Alone and injured survival seemed impossible. Miles away, a lone rider pushed through the storm. Daniel Hayes had spent the day in town selling cattle and supplies. He was a quiet rancher, known more for his honesty than for words. He preferred the company of open land and horses to crowded streets. When the storm hit, he had considered staying in town, but something urged him home. His horse slowed as they approached a bend in the trail. Through the sheets of rain, Daniel noticed the shadow of a wrecked carriage. He frowned. No one traveled this road at night unless forced to. He dismounted, cautiously tying his horse to a nearby post. The scene felt wrong, broken wood, scattered belongings, silence. Then he saw her at first. He thought she was already gone. Mud covered her dress and her dark hair clung to her face. But when he knelt beside her, he noticed the faint rise and fall of her chest. "She's alive," he muttered to himself, relief mixing with urgency. Without hesitation, Daniel removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around her trembling body. She was ice cold. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. For a brief second he wondered who could have left her here, but there was no time for questions. The storm grew stronger and the plains showed no mercy. Daniel mounted his horse, holding her securely against him. He turned toward his ranch several miles away. As lightning split the sky again, he whispered quietly, almost like a promise, "You're not dying out here." And with that he rode into the darkness, unaware that this single act of compassion would change both their lives forever. The ride back to Daniel's ranch felt longer than ever before. The storm lashed against them mercilessly, rain soaking through Daniel's shirt. As he held Isabella firmly in front of him, her head rested weakly against his chest, and every few moments he checked to make sure she was still breathing. "Stay with me," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. His ranch finally came into view through the rain, a modest, wooden house with a small stable and fenced land stretching behind it. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it was warm, safe, and built with honest work. Daniel quickly dismounted. Carrying Isabella inside, his thunder rumbled overhead. Inside, the fire in the hearth had nearly burned out. He laid her gently on his bed and moved quickly to stir the embers back to life. Soon flames flickered and warmth filled the small room. He removed her soaked outer garments, respectfully turning his eyes away as he covered her in dry blankets. He had no experience caring for injured women, but he knew enough about survival to recognize danger. Her forehead burned with fever. Daniel fetched water, cleaned the mud and blood from her face, and discovered a cut along her temple. It wasn't deep, but it had blood heavily. He washed the wound carefully and wrapped it with a clean cloth. Every few minutes he placed a cool, damp rag on her forehead, trying to bring the fever down. The night felt endless. He didn't sleep. He sat beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall, listening for any change in her breathing. Outside, the storm slowly faded into silence, but inside the house, tension remained heavy. At dawn, pale sunlight filtered through the small window. Daniel leaned forward when he noticed her fingers twitch. Her breathing shifted, becoming deeper slowly. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her dark eyes. She looked around at the unfamiliar wooden ceiling, the simple room, the crackling fire. Panic flashed across her face as she tried to move. "You're safe," Daniel said gently, raising his hands to calm her. "Easy now, you were hurt." Her voice came out hoarse and fragile. Where am I?" "My ranch. I found you near a wrecked carriage." Memory seemed to rush back into her expression. Fear, gunshots, her family, the storm. Tears welled in her eyes as realization struck. They left, she whispered more to herself than to him. Daniel didn't ask questions. He simply handed her a cup of water. Drink slowly, she obeyed, her hands trembling after a moment. She looked at him properly for the first time. He wasn't dressed like a wealthy man. His hands were rough from labor, his shirt plain, his expression sincere. "My name is Isabella," she said softly. "Daniel," he replied with a small nod. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt cautious, two strangers connected by circumstance. "You saved me," she said quietly. Daniel shrugged slightly. Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't true. As the morning light grew stronger, Isabella felt something she hadn't felt since the attack security. This simple rancher had stayed awake all night, for someone he didn't even know, and for the first time since being abandoned on the plains. She believed she might actually survive. Weeks passed since that stormy night, and Isabella slowly regained her strength. The once fragile, frightened woman who had been left to die had grown into someone resilient and determined. Each morning, she woke to the golden sunlight spilling across the plains, the scent of fresh hay and horses filling the air. Daniel's ranch was modest, but it was honest work, and the wide, open land felt more freeing than the grand estate she had once known. Isabella insisted on helping around the ranch. At first, Daniel tried to stop her. "Worried about her safety, you should rest more," he said one morning, watching her struggle with the sack of feed. She looked up at him, determination in her eyes. "I'm not a child, I can help." Slowly, he began to let her take part in the daily chores, and in doing so, they both discovered the comfort of shared work. Soon they began riding together across the rolling fields, their horses keeping pace as the wind whipped through their hair. At first, the rides were silent, punctuated only by the rhythm of hooves against soft earth. But as days turned into weeks, conversation flowed. Isabella spoke of her life before the attack, the wealthy circles she had been forced to move in, the constant pressure to meet expectations, the cold indifference of her family. Daniel listened, offering no judgment, only a steady presence for Daniel. These rides became a daily ritual, a way to watch Isabella grow stronger and more confident. Her laughter began to ring through the open plains, light and unrestrained, something he had never heard in the city or the courts of the wealthy, and gradually he realized that the bond between them was changing. It wasn't just trust or gratitude, though that had been the beginning. It was something deeper, quieter, and undeniable. One evening they paused on a ridge overlooking the sun setting. Beyond the horizon, the sky burned orange and pink, the plains stretching endlessly before them. Daniel adjusted his saddle slightly, glancing at her profile, and noticed how her eyes reflected the fading light. Isabella looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't speak. She simply allowed herself to feel the calm, the warmth, and the safety he had brought her. Their hands brushed as she reached to steady herself on the saddle. Both felt the electricity of that touch. Neither spoke immediately, but both understood. The rescuer and the rescued were no longer separate. Friendship had blossomed into something more delicate and thrilling, the kind of love that didn't demand words, only trust and understanding. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, Daniel finally broke the silence. "You've changed, Isabella," he said softly. "Not just from the storm, but from everything before. You're stronger now." She smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his. "And I wouldn't have gotten here without you." The ride back to the ranch that night was quiet, but the air between them was charged with unspoken emotions. Both knew their lives were changing. That something once unimaginable, love born from trust, from rescue, from companionship, was taking root. The woman left to die was now alive, breathing, thriving, and slowly, inseparably connected to the man who had saved her. By the time they reached the ranch, the stars were scattered across the sky like diamonds, and neither of them could imagine returning to the life they had once known. Together they were creating a new world. One ride, one laugh, one shared moment at a time. The months that followed were filled with quiet mornings, golden sunsets, and the simple rhythm of ranch life. Isabella had settled into a routine that she had never imagined possible. The sprawling fields, the scent of hay, the lowing of cattle, and the creak of saddle leather became the backdrop of her new life. She no longer thought of the life she had lost, her family's cold indifference, their greed, their abandonment. That world felt distant now, almost unreal. Daniel had become her anchor every day. He worked tirelessly on the ranch, and she worked alongside him, learning to ride with confidence, to tend to the animals, and to manage the chores with the steady calm he exhibited. They laughed together, argued occasionally over small disagreements, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, their friendship deepened into love. But neither had spoken it aloud. There was a quiet understanding between them, a mutual recognition of what their hearts were beginning to feel. One afternoon, as the sun burned low across the plains, Daniel and Isabella rode to a familiar ridge, the place where their hands had first brushed weeks ago. The sky glowed in shades of amber and violet. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of wildflowers and freshly turned earth. Isabella's hair danced across her face, her eyes reflecting the sunset, and Daniel felt a surge of emotion he could no longer deny. He stopped his horse and turned to her. His heart pounding. "Isabella," he said, voice low, almost trembling, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him curiously, her chest tightening. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. I can't imagine my life without you. You're not just safe here. You're my life. I want you with me always." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. She reached for his hand, feeling the strength and sincerity in his grasp. "Daniel, I was afraid to hope again, afraid of being left behind. But you showed me what it means to be loved, truly loved, and I choose you always." The words hung in the air, carrying the weight of their shared history, of the nights of fear of the storm that had brought them together. In that moment there was no past, no wealth, no abandonment. Only them, only the plains and the promise of forever. They married under the open sky, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the ranch that had become their home. There was no grand church, no ornate decorations, only the whisper of the wind through the grass, the glow of the setting sun, and the hearts of two people who had found each other against all odds. Isabella, once abandoned and left to die, now stood as the heart of a home built on trust, love, and resilience. Daniel, the quiet rancher who had ridden into the storm, now held not just her life, but her heart together. They faced every day with gratitude, laughter, and unshakable love. The plains stretched endlessly before them, golden and free, just as their new life stretched ahead, boundless, open, and theirs to shape. And as the wind whispered through the tall grass, Isabella leaned into Daniel, knowing that for the first time, she had found her place in the world, a place where she belonged, and where love would never abandon her again.